Welcome back. This is part 4 of my FXR build. You'll notice I got a red side cover on here. That's going to come off later. Got my air cleaner covered to not scratch it. And test fit right now is my Whiplash Speed Company seat. Today we're going to be installing the exhaust, topping up some fluids, and hopefully firing this bike up. The owner's manual calls for, the service manual calls for 24 ounces when the transmission is dry. And this transmission's been opened up, so it is dry. I think it's 22 ounces wet or something. So it's a Thrashin supply 2-in-1 anti-reversion style exhaust. I believe it's 2.5. I don't remember exactly. Not that it matters. But it came with the bracket, which is already on the bike, and pretty much all the necessary hardware with the exception of the flanges. So I got my flanges on, and I got the oxygen sensor ports plugged. Even though this is an FXR, it still comes with oxygen sensor ports because this is the same head pipe as a Dyna. So Dynas come with fuel injection. But it's nice if you're going to build a fuel injected FXR, you already have the ports on some of the big name exhaust. Head pipe is mounted. The nuts for tightening the flanges are not completely tight, just enough to take the slack out. Now it's time to install the muffler cone. You want a little bit of play while you install this on the head pipe, so that's why those aren't torqued to final spec yet. Here it is, fits really well. Still got to take the tape off, obviously, do a final tightening and wipe it down, but it fits great and it looks really good. Last major piece of the puzzle showed up today. I'm really stoked about these. I've been waiting for a while to get them just because the whole process of building these took a while. I got the rear shocks. These are RaceTechs, and they're from the guys over at Diamond Lane, and they did a killer job on them. So these are the GS3 shocks. I got them in 13.5. And what Diamond Lane did for me, they fully polished the body. They had the springs chrome. They polished the adjusters. And they blued that shaft in there. And also black bump stops. So this is Diamond Lane's thing. They do all the coating of fork tubes and shocks. And I think it looks killer. So I'm really stoked to put these on the bike. I take these old stock wore out shocks off. Obviously, it's got some work to go. Doesn't even have a side cover. Plenty of stuff to tighten up. Air cleaner cover, but I couldn't resist getting it out in the sun just to see it. Something you may have noticed, I had red side covers on the bike. Needless to say, those aren't original and those are not the ones I'm going to be running. The original ones were a metallic blue and they had FXRC silk screened on the side of it. Unfortunately, when I bought the bike from the original owner, he had chrome side covers, and I guess he just threw out or sold the original FXRC side covers, so I don't have them. For now, until I could find some for a reasonable price, I'm going to be doing a two-tone style paint job with black and metallic blue. The metallic blue I'm going to be using is something I found at Home Depot. It's a super close match. I went to a paint shop to try to match the original metallic blue, and they could not do it. They weren't guaranteeing the match, and the only other option was to get spray outs, and that was going to be expensive for just a side cover. When it comes time to repaint the tins, if I do that, I don't really have plans for it, then I'll do a good job and I won't be using spray cans, and I'll do spray outs to get a good match. But for now, we're going to use that metallic blue, and for the Vivid Black, this Duplicolor Universal Black is a good match. I'm going to get started on this, and hopefully when the finished product is done, it'll make a little bit more sense. As far as, paint advice, prep, and spraying, and taping, and what order to spray in, don't take any advice from me. I'm not a professional. So you can see I traced out with a pencil where the two-tone division is going to be. And I got that from a factory side cover. I took measurements to get the exact, well, not exact, but close dimensions. If you've ever seen some bikes have a factory two-tone side cover. blue is done, black is done. They look decent. I'm going to pinstripe with silver and red now, and then I'm going to clear coat the whole thing. So the side cover is all done. It came out pretty good. There's a little bit of orange peel for sure, But then again, I didn't even sand this and buff it. This is just the way it came out of the can. So I think that's a pretty good finish. Pinstripes aren't perfect, but I did it with tape instead of a pinstripe brush. There's no way I can even attempt to use a pinstripe brush. I don't have that level of skill. So I'm going to try to put this on without getting it too scratched up. It's a really tight fit between this wire for the control module and the brake reservoir. Next up, I got this license plate frame to mount. This is I believe it's a V-twin manufacturing. A lot of people make this. It's all really the same style and all comes from the same factory in China, I'm sure. So as you can see, I have my air cleaner cover and my gauge installed, so my order is a little screwed up here, forgive me. So let's talk about installing this gauge. I got this gauge mounted down here. It was just a temporary solution just to monitor the oil pressure as I did the heat cycling and break-in. It was just a gauge I had kicking around the garage. It's not what I'm going to be running, so I'll show you what I have planned. So this is the gauge mount I'm going to be using. It comes from J-Rin Cycles. I believe that's how you say their name. They sell a lot of Ultima motors. This is for an 1.5" mechanical gauge. And the reason I got this is because most gauge kits are just that, a kit. And you can't really choose the gauge you use, and it comes with the lines and everything. I wanted to piece it together myself. So I got just the bracket and this mechanical gauge. It goes up to 100 psi because this fueling cam chest and oil pump runs a higher than 60 psi pressure at times. Usually when cold, I'm sure once it heats up it might be below it, but I wanted to have a full range. And I haven't decided yet, but I'll probably run hard lines instead of a braided hose. This is for an Evo though, I believe. So I'm probably going to have to drill this hole a little bit bigger, we'll see. I got to pull this bolt out to find out. That's what I figured. I'm going to have to drill this hole a little bit bigger. Not a big fan of it since it is chromed and you risk chipping the chrome, but we'll go nice and slow with the stepped bit. So here it is mounted up. I like the way this gauge face looks. So now we're going to run some hard lines for it. I got the parts to plumb this oil pressure gauge up as I mentioned. I want to do a hard line on this just because it's going to be a physically smaller diameter, so it'll be hidden a little bit better. And I can get the exact length I want versus, you know, a stainless braided hose. It's a little bit bulkier. It's not going to keep itself in place. And you got to be exact with the length. So this is 1/4 inch NPT to 3AN. That's going to go down on the side of the engine case there. This is 1/8 inch female to 3AN male. That's going to go on the bottom of the oil pressure gauge here. And these are 3AN to 3/16 ferrules. These are going to connect our hard line to the fittings. And this is the hard line I'm using. It is 3/16 stainless brake line, and it's got a little bit of a polish to it. After I find the shape I want, I might try to hit this with a buff wheel real quick and see if it shines up anymore. One thing to mention when you're tightening up a fitting to a gauge, make sure you always have a wrench on it, on these flats here. If you're just holding this face by hand and tightening the fitting on, you're going to throw off the calibration of the gauge. Or even if you're just relying on this being clamped in here and tightening this up, same thing, you're going to throw it off. So here's the ferrule here. Just going to screw it on there for now. So now I'm going to plan out my route for this line. I think I'm going to go right here underneath the carburetor. So you can see my broken tubing bender here. I broke this bending, I want to say 1/4 inch stainless from my turbo feed line on my car. I would say if you're going to buy one of these, get a semi well-known name brand like OTC or something. I just got the cheapest one I can on Amazon. I think it was 11 bucks and it failed me. So this is kind of a lot of just trial and error test fitting. I got plenty of line, so I could probably cut it long and work with a shorter piece instead of the whole roll. But it's going to come down from the gauge, and I want to roll down underneath the carb a little bit, and then eventually down to the front of the engine. So here's the shape I came up with for the oil pressure line. I'm kind of having second thoughts about using hardline versus a hose, just because stainless steel does work hardened with vibration. And I worked on ships for a few years, and I did come across stainless lines that just fatigued. Ships vibrate a lot. Harleys vibrate a lot. I may or may not go to a stainless steel line, a braided line that is, a hose, but I'll cross that bridge a little later on. I'm going to attempt to flare this stainless line now. Most important part, don't forget this. I've done that probably a million times. That looks good enough. These usually are pretty hard to get right on the first try, but that looks good to me. So this side didn't come out as nice. Hopefully it'll seal. If not, then I might just ditch this idea altogether. So I've been waiting until I had this all lined up and ready to go, because this is going to leak oil out once I start swapping the fittings. So I want this to be ready to go, hook it up, minimize my oil leaks. Like I had mentioned earlier, that little oil pressure gauge down there, that was a temporary thing because I did heat cycle this engine already. I started it up, everything sounded pretty good so far. I'm going to start it up again to test this new oil gauge line, make sure it doesn't leak, and this will be the first time you guys hear this motor. I do have to throw the jump box on it. The battery's kind of getting a little weak from sitting. That little Moto Gadget setup, it does draw a little tiny bit in standby mode because it's got an alarm. So I'm going to throw the jump box on there. I haven't set my trickle charger up yet. I want to weigh the bike since I did the twin cam swap. More just out of curiosity than anything. See what it weighs in at compared to, you know, some of the newer bikes, Sportsters, Dynas. So I'm going to zero out my scale with the straps I'm going to be using. So there you go. You can see I put the passenger pegs on upside down so they wouldn't bend up. and I just wrapped the sling around the neck. Came in at 590, which is pretty good all things considered for 3/4 tank of gas and all the fluids are in it. I also zeroed out the scale with the shackle and the slings on it, so that was the true weight we saw. I'm sure as some of you heard when this started up, the engine was very noisy. There was a loud clacking noise. Initially, I thought it could have been a push rod not adjusted right, but I double checked those and they were good. And on the way out of doing the push rods, I took the air cleaner cover off, and it's actually the slide on the Mikuni carburetors vibrating back and forth with the intake pulses. So I have a little video of that with my cell phone I'll show you. So as you can see in the video, it's literally just a slide on that Mikuni carburetor. I've had them before, but I've never had them on a bike with this aggressive of a cam and this high compression, so I'm sure that's why I never really noticed it before. And also this intake is fairly open compared to some of the other systems. That's all I got for this video. All I have was the startup. Next video I will be doing some onboard driving and also some drive-bys and doing the first test ride. And hopefully it will not take me nearly as long to produce that next video. So, thanks for watching.